Hello Internet, I'm Jackie Fox. Welcome to another episode of Gumi Economics. This is going to be our 202 course, so we are moving ahead with the 200 level content, and today I want to talk about the meta. Now on this channel recently, I have taken a lot of time to reevaluate the meta and what the future of the meta might be. However, I have actually come across a really interesting point that I want to make an entire video about in doing so. And those are the differences between high-tier meta and mid-tier meta. For the intents and purposes of this video, mid-tier meta is probably best defined as rank 100 guilds to maybe rank 300 or 400 guilds. I think that this playstyle is probably most applicable to the whole of wotv. And unfortunately, it feels as though most content creators, and this isn't a dig at other content creators, right? I think especially the best content creators recognize this and try to account for it. But a lot of us are longtime players, and a lot of us like this game enough to make YouTube videos about it, so we probably like it enough to put a little bit of money into it, naturally meaning that we tend to have better access to resources and usually higher placement in the meta, in the guild rankings. We tend to belong to the highest ranked guilds. And while I am in a high-ranked guild, that is not necessarily the part of the meta that I enjoy the most, and even though I am in guilds all throughout what I would call mid-range, and have been at different points in time and different points in the meta, I can say that there is a difference between the top of mid-range and the bottom of mid-range. And because most content creators are at the top, because a lot of the smaller content creators that are at more mid-range guild levels or PvP levels aren't really piloting big channels within the community, they're more posting, gameplay videos and getting maybe 3 or 4 likes from people in their guild because they posted it on Discord, right? Those are the kind of people that I want to reach out to on this channel. Those are the type of people that I want to represent. That is the iteration of the meta that I want to cover here. So, if some of my opinions diverge from other content creators, keep in mind that while I could be wrong, I am a fallible human being. A reason that my opinion might be markedly different than some other people is the fact that I am building this channel to account for the majority of the wotv fanbase, whereas I feel like some of the advice that is given in top tier stuff, while it is good advice for top tier players, doesn't necessarily translate as well for lower level gamers. And let me explain what I mean by that. So I think that probably the best example of this is Fire for JP right now, and probably like in general. Fire is a really good example of what I mean, because Fire is traditionally considered to be a bad element. And while the most critiqued part of my meta projection video, which I will have to get around to doing some corrections in this video for, while probably the most corrected thing is that lightning isn't number 1, and I agree with that, especially now as the video is being published. I think that is less true, and that's something I mentioned in the video, and that's actually something that PST mentioned in her video, which was released probably a good 2 weeks before mine, so it only became more true over time. But the thing that I regret the most myself is saying that Fire was really good, because while I am sure this is true, and while this is actually one of the things that I said in the video that Odaiba maybe backs up the best, even though he disagreed with a lot of more or less everything else I said in terms of the elemental tier list, at least. The problem that Fire has always had, and the problem that Fire has seemingly doubled if not tripled down on, is that to run a good Fire team, which have to some degree always existed on the fringes, but always existed, you need a lot of limited cards. I mean, think about it. For the longest time, in my recollection, the glue that was holding together Fire teams and giving them viability within the meta was Terra. Terra, a unit that most people skipped because they didn't see her value, became a really amazing evasion counter at a time in the game when evasion was very strong. Fire teams with Terra were very good. At least if you had a bunch of limited fire VCs, especially if you have Terra's VC, which itself is limited. And then we're going into a meta where, if you want to do fire evasion, you probably need Sorrow, but you definitely need Sorrow's VC. Both of those things are limited and unavailable to us now, so if you don't have it, honestly, you might as well forget about fire evasion. I'm just saying. I've said it before and I will continue to say it. Yuffie alone is not fire evasion. Her and her VC are great for it, but you need the building blocks of Sorrow and his VC, at least at this point. And then looking at like Fire Glove or Fire Magic, you've got Roy Mustang, and you've got 100 cost limited Kefka, and then you're probably still going to want Kefka's VC. You're definitely going to want Roy's VC. You might also want Terra's VC. I'm sure there are other older limited Fire VCs that I'm not even thinking about. My point is that I'm not necessarily surprised when Odaiba said that fire teams are doing really well in top tier play. Because top tier play selects for the players that are most likely to have the most powerful and the most limited teams. I'm not saying that the most limited teams are always the best, but what I am saying is that if anyone is playing the most limited teams, it is top tier players. And maybe there's a lot of overlap here with whales or maybe swordfish, dolphins, whatever classification of mid-sized fish. I know dolphins aren't fish, but it's still a thing that people... Anyways, what I'm saying is that certain archetypes are going to be more viable in top tier play. Odaiba also said that at the point that we are at in Global, that we should also be having a really dominant fire team for evasion, even without Yuffie, all thanks to Sorrow and Sorrow's VC. The thing is, I don't see those teams. I don't really see those teams ever. I haven't seen those teams, and I continue not to see those teams. I mean, I occasionally see them, but usually they're suboptimal. What I mean by suboptimal is maybe they don't have Sorrow, maybe they're trying to make it work with Valentine Zildira, maybe they have Sorrow but they don't have Valentine Zildira and they have something else that's kind of off and their VCs kind of suck, they don't have the limited VCs that they need, or they have Sorrow and they have Valentine Zildira and they have King Mont but they don't have Sorrow's VC. There's just so many ways that this team goes wrong in lower tier play because of the requirements to actually make it work the way that it needs to work to be able to evade. And I think that that's probably going to be true also of how powerful fire magic teams need to be to knock things out before they get hit, and it might be a lot harder to push their magic damage level over that line for a player with more limited resources. And if you're looking at mid-rank play, people have more limited resources. Now, I think that this is already true, and my experience of playing the game across those ranks shows me that there are a spectrum of things that are viable at any given time. Now, with that being said, I do want to go back to something Odaiba said that I agreed with wholeheartedly. Let me set it up with a part that I don't agree with. Odaiba says that there is only one meta, which I do not agree with, unless you want to change what meta means. It depends on how you look at it. If you're thinking about variations on a meta, or if you're thinking about how meta a certain rank is, like, top 10 are like 100% meta, and then maybe if there's like a meta to hipster spectrum, like top 400 is way more hipster, and then you get below that and you start seeing like Prince Mont everywhere and stuff, and like Tidus and Lucio all over the place. So, if you want to look at it at how meta teams at a certain rank are and say that there's one meta, okay. But the part that I do agree with is that the best strategies will always be the best strategies. The best units will always be the best units. I don't completely agree with that, actually, but I mean, I don't usually agree with always statements to begin with, because I think that there is room for nuance here, and that a blanket statement like that, which I'm not even sure that that's how Odaiba said it, so I don't want to put words in the dude's mouth, because I really appreciate the time and effort that he took in replying to me, and trying to help me understand my own mistakes. That takes and not be condescending about it, or insulting, like that takes a real classy person, and Odaiba is classy as fuck in my opinion because of it. Anyways, the part that I agree with is that those best units are going to be the best units regardless. Like, them being good on paper doesn't change. What changes is the ecosystem, and I think especially with the way that the 140 meta looks, I mean, I just watched a new video showing how to take a unit all the way to 140 and max out their stats, and it was again reiterated that it takes about 80 reincarnations to do this, but also that you're probably only going to get enough scrolls per month to do 5 of those for free. So that definitely says to me that unless you are spending money in this game, the units that are the best may not always be the best, depending on how awakened they are. I mean, I think that a good unit that's older, that is fully awakened, is at least going to stand on the same ground as a newer unit that you couldn't afford to fully awaken, right? So certain types of units are going to benefit a lot more than others. Units that have great resistances. I think Sephiroth is a really great example of this because of both his physical resistances and his elemental resistances. There's a lot of units that really fit this protocol. There's a lot of tanks that fit this. There's a lot of DPS units that need that extra bit of damage to push them over to the edge to where they can one-hit people more reliably, which keeps them safer, especially if they're glass cannons. Which is a big part of the reason that I think that while Winged Stern may even actually be a little bit meta-warping at top-tier play, I'm not saying he's going to be bad. I'm not saying that he's going to be a bad investment for light players. He is almost certainly going to be a great investment, and doubly so if you really go whole hog on him and really max him out. That being said, I don't anticipate that a lot of the type free-to-play players that are in my audience, or the audience that I am at least intentionally trying to cultivate, will go that far with him. Therefore, their mileage may vary. But before I get into the final point of this video, I want to talk about some of the mistakes that I made in making that elemental tier list at the very least. One of the complaints that I half agree with that Odaiba posted on Reddit was the assertion that I had based my elemental tier list on the unit tier list, and that that's inherently a bad way to understand this. And that is not really what I did. Most of the things I had all sorts of team-based reasons and synergy-based reasons. Like, again, the reason that I rank Wind really low is because their best unit, their best new unit, doesn't have a good synergy with their team. Their 100 cost unit does not have good Wind synergy. Therefore, I ranked Wind lower. I was thinking about the teams all throughout that. However, as I was fine-tuning adjustments, I did often think about where individual units were ranked. Whether I weighted that too much or not, I guess is beside the point, and I don't want to intimate that Odaiba didn't watch the video. But given that he's already watched PST's video, which is an hour and a half long, why would he watch a global player try to understand that video that he's already watched and understands better because he is a fellow JP player? Why would he even watch my content? Like, I don't expect him to, is what I'm saying. So, definitely from the thumbnail, it would seem that I did that. That isn't really the way that I did it, but mistakes were made because of that. And I think some of the biggest mistakes were expecting that certain elements would be good when historically they really haven't. And one of the only real exceptions to this that I am still willing to stand very much behind is Earth, because Earth has historically been kind of trash, and I think it's in a place where it is actually good enough. And I also think that it helps, again, that Wind has some issues with their 100 cost unit. Now again, Wind does have more new units than some other elements, and does have a really good combo in Tifa and Edward, a really good combo that I think is going to be way more impactful for lower tier play, where you have a lot more free-to-play players that are building the units that they can get. I think this is an amazing combo for new players. It's definitely something you should go for. The free VC that works for Strike is also amazing for this team. You have a really good start building this, so I think it's going to be even more popular, but I still think that Earth is going to be strong if you build it. I don't think it might be as strong, but that wasn't that wasn't a mistake anyone corrected me on. Anyways, the mistakes that I was actually corrected on were that, Fire wasn't as strong. I had a couple people say that, although Odaiba defended Fire, so I'm not really sure how wrong I was about Fire. Although, given everything that I've just said, if I am catering this tier list more to the mid-range meta, or what I believe the mid-range meta to be, I think Fire drops off a lot because of how limited it is and how few players have access to the full kit that makes it work. But Lightning, which has been historically pretty strong, does definitely have a lot of problems in any meta where Earth is particularly strong. The one time that I think Lightning had a lot of trouble, especially on defense, Lightning on defense has been pretty powerful and well used and frequently used pretty consistently, especially in lower tier gameplay, compared to what I see from higher tier reports of the meta. But I think that Lightning is going to be especially challenging to play on defense with Earth being so strong, and that's 1/3 of gameplay in PvP. So that is a real mark against them, a real demerit. Water, a lot of people took issue that I ranked Water as high as I did, and part of that is because I've been running Water on defense since Perrine came out, and it's done really well. I never expected this to be the case, because when I started playing Water, I was getting my ass kicked on defense. That was why I started building a secondary element. I wanted it to just be a Water-focused account because I thought that Water was a really cool element. I just like mages, and I like kind of what Water does. I like anti-magic mages. Water is my jam. But as a Water player, I've known for quite a long time that it is incredibly limited on defense, and really always has been. Again, probably just because of the prevalence of units like Cloud and the prevalence of people who pulled Cloud trying to build around him because he's the fan favorite FF unit. That is always going to be a thorn in Water's side, especially because being an anti-magic element, they don't do as well against physical matchups, and especially against ranged matchups, and Lightning has both of those in Cloud. I think that Water might be more impactful in lower tier meta, but probably not as high as I ranked it. It also was pointed out that in my defense of certain elements, I did factor in their rainbowness. As for why I like the combinations they have with other elements and stuff. So arguably I should have ranked Rainbow higher for sure. I definitely undervalue Winged Stern, and I've said that many times since. And I've really come to terms with how much I've undervalued him since. I still don't think that he is going to have the same impact on lower tier metas that he has on the top tier. However, I do think that it is definitely worth being above the lower of the 3 tiers for this ranking list. Wind is arguably a little better than I ranked it. Ice, especially with recent news, is definitely better than I ranked it. But again, this was a snapshot, and this was before Howlet. So I kind of stand by what I said there, but apparently it's a really incredible attacking team even still, which is also kind of true of Wind, maybe. There was less confirmation of that. So those 2 elements definitely deserve to be higher. And thinking about it, I think that, especially since I just made a video about how new players can get a free Sephiroth, and I think that that's probably the way that new players are most likely to think about this. Probably the most appealing way to phrase it to them at the very least. So I think that there's going to be a lot more Sephiroth. Not that there's going to be more than in high tier, but I think that Sephiroth is, for everything that I've said about limited units being a bit more rare in lower level gameplay, I'm not sure that this is going to be as true of Sephiroth. A properly built Sephiroth might be incredibly rare, but Sephiroth himself as a unit will not be, and I think that because there is less stable competition and that he is so much of what is good with his element, that this will make Dark a lot stronger for a while in mid-range play. But I also think it is also worth pointing out that, you know, Dark being ranked as low as it was on this tier list is really only because it has been slipping kind of steadily since Sephiroth was released, and really feels like it probably needs Rafu to again be very definitively top tier. So those are the things that I think I got wrong, especially with that elemental list, and holy crap, I think I named every element, so wow. Really batting zero on that one. But I think that a lot of the logic still kind of holds up, if not the tier list itself. Anyways, this all brings me to my final point in the video. This was something that is a lot more controversial on Reddit. And one thing I do want to say, I'm glad I don't post the Gumi economics videos to Reddit anymore. Because Reddit has a bit of a reputation of being kind of a haven for know-it-alls, which is really great if you want answers. It is a great part of the internet to go for answers, and honestly, me being dumb on Reddit has taught me a lot. That being said, it because of all of that, it attracts very top-tier players. It attracts that top-tier mentality. And I kind of think that's a bubble. And I kind of think maybe a little bit for the good of the community, it needs to pop. Because, especially, like, this is a problem that is way overrepresented in media to begin with. This is something that is way broader than wotv. It's way broader than video games. But typically, the people who make the content that we consume do not share a class interest with us. They are relatively wealthy. Or the company that they work for is relatively wealthy, because there are a lot of companies that employ a lot of people to make home-style content, you know, on YouTube, a lot more than you would expect sometimes. Like, I didn't expect All Gas No Brakes to have a financial backer until I found out that he was having trouble with this financial backer. Anyways, this, I think, will become an even greater issue within the wotv community moving into 140, and especially with global. Say what you want about Japan, and I don't want to make the case either that I know a lot about Japan's economics, or that this is... I do want to say that this is a overly broad generalization, so take it for what it is. But in general, income inequality, statistically speaking, on average, is considerably lower in Japan than it is in many other places in the world, especially America. Culturally, this is largely not necessarily due to laws, although I'm sure they have plenty of laws in place to prevent certain things from happening that America would definitely benefit from at the very least. But, you know, mainly they just use cultural shame. Like, these CEOs would feel bad, would be shunned by society if they ripped off their employees in the same way that American corporate executives do our own. You know, the whole stock buyback saga would not be happening in Japan because that is antithetical to Japanese culture. That being said, because of that, income inequality is a bigger issue in the world, in the global community, than it is specifically in Japan. So any rich versus poor that is happening right now in JP will only be exacerbated in the global community. And I don't want to take too American of a perspective here, because I think that a lot of these income inequality and specifically currency issues actually tend to be even more dramatic and pronounced in countries with less disposable income that aren't America. So specifically I'm thinking about South America, which from my knowledge has historically had a really shit currency exchange rate for buying Viz in-game. So, you know, especially for my South American comrades that watch my channel, y'all are definitely going to have a different way of looking at investment in this game than a top-tier player would. And it is my opinion that there are not enough channels that are servicing this majority of wotv players. And I think that that's a really weird phenomenon, and that is ultimately what encouraged me to get into wotv YouTubing. It is a massively underserved community that has the potential for a larger audience than a lot of the mainstream YouTubers covering wotv right now have. And, you know, I would rather help more people than help the top guilds. The top guilds have enough help. Everybody else needs that same respect. So, if you appreciate that, fucking like and subscribe. I'm going to make more content like this. Maybe not specifically like this, but with this spirit in mind. And if you would like to see me share a class interest with more of the people who can stay at home and make YouTube videos, then you can always send me $1 on Patreon, because there are so many of you that if even a tenth of all the people who benefit from this style of wotv content gave me $1 on Patreon per month, I would share a class interest with some of those folks, and I would definitely be pulling more. That being said, you don't have to give me money. It is certainly enough to like and subscribe, and if you're really appreciative, leave a comment. It definitely helps me in the algorithm. This channel has actually been doing fairly well in the algorithm lately, so let's keep it going. Leave a comment. Food for the robot. Thanks for the video. Doesn't matter. Everything helps. Thank you. Have a nice day, and see you in the next one.